Well, here we are yet again in YouTube world, where we are witnessing another bloody sacrifice of the facts on the altar of rhetoric, and this time it's at the hand of Mr. Pat Condell with another episode of the I Hate Islam show. It's a show he never seems to get tired of hosting. He's been doing it for quite a long time now, and I used to be a subscriber of Pat Condell back in the days when he seemed to be a kind of fresh and interesting voice on the topics of the tensions of multiculturalism, of religious cohesion, atheism and immigration, and a variety of other things. But unfortunately those kind of interesting takes seem to have fallen away and been replaced by just one unrelenting, unyielding thread of I hate Islam, repeated over and over again. Now, I'd like to be very clear here, as a gay, atheist English person, I'm not exactly an apologist for Islam. I have lots of things I don't like about it. It is a religion that has enabled the cultural, doctrinal and legal subjugation of women for centuries and continues to do so. It is used as the justification for honour killings of people and began up until the modern day. I have actually personally known people who've had to disappear from their families because of fear of what they might do to them simply for the crime of going out, having a life, drinking. Oh my god. It's a religion that executes people for their sexual preferences, something obviously I'm going to be very, very happy about myself. And also it's a religion that continues to this day to use corporal and capital punishment as a way of enforcing law over sometimes the silliest and flimsiest of crimes, such as basically people deciding they don't want to be Muslims anymore. Also, we're making disclosures here. I also love Sweden. It's a fantastic country. I like it a lot. I love the people there. And okay, it's not perfect. No country is. But I quite resent the way it's being used as a prop in Mr. Condell's latest screed against Islam. So, without further ado, why don't we move on to the video and some of the more tenuous assertions that are within it.
No country in Europe has done more to embrace the multicultural nightmare, dream, than Sweden, meaning no country has opened its arms wider to Muslim immigration.
Now Pat, I'm sure it felt lovely to be able to say something as inflammatory and juicy as that, but I'd really like to know what you're basing that on. First, immigration policies don't actually target specific countries of origin unless they're part of a larger guest worker program or a lottery system, such as those that are run by Germany and the United States respectively. And Sweden doesn't have anything like that, so it can't actually encourage immigration from specific countries even if it wanted to. So as far as I can tell, it's just simply Muslims picking Sweden over other countries, if indeed that's what's happening, and I really don't think you can pin that on the Swedish state as something that's their fault. Moreover, I spent some time doing a bit of number crunching, and I didn't find any data that supported your claim. My sources are in the bar below if you want to try and pick apart my analysis, but according to the statistics published by Statistics Sweden, out of the top 20 immigration origin nations, only 6 are officially Islamic or have sizable Islamic populations. Between 2005 and 2009, the total immigration from those top 20 countries was around 92,000 from Muslim countries versus 211,000 from non-Muslim countries. But, okay, then, given how distrustful you seem to be of the Swedish state and its quest to be the most uber-multicultural country in the world, it could be possible that you're not swayed by stats produced by the Swedes, so let's instead refer to statistics produced by the OECD. Over the last 10 years, Sweden was ranked 8th within the European OECD membership in its overall number of foreigners in its population. True, I don't have a breakdown of the origin countries within the OECD data, but if you're willing to accept that the stats produced by Statistics Sweden are not completely cooked and bullshit, then it seems unlikely that all those people are Muslim. Ah, you say, but Sweden's quite a small country. What about the numbers as a proportion of its population? It could be overrun by Muslims, you know. Well, no. The proportion of foreigners in Sweden in total is 6.9 in 2009, putting it 11th in the European OECD membership. Assuming for the sake of argument that all of those foreigners were Muslim, I'd really say that using the term being overrun was egging it just a tad. Furthermore, according to nationmaster.com, the percentage of the Swedish population that is categorised as Muslim is actually 4%, and let's remember that Muslims are not a religion that tend to underreport their numbers. Incidentally, that puts them 93rd out of 168 countries, so I'd hardly call that the bastion of Islam in Europe. Given that the Muslim population of France is 7.5% and in the Netherlands it's 6%, I'm really struggling to come to the same conclusion that you have here, that Sweden has this special place of trying to invite more Muslim immigration specifically.
Now we hear that the government there is so determined to dilute their culture clean out of existence that they have actually changed the constitution without consulting the people. And you no longer have to be a Swedish citizen to hold sensitive or high government office, including national prosecutor, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and? I mean, I'm planning to move to Sweden in the next couple of years, and given that my professional background is in government, I could very well end up working there in Sweden too. Should the Swedes deliberately exclude me from sensitive positions in government, or does it not apply to me because I'm not brown and I don't pray to Mecca?
And Swedes are constitutionally obliged to practice multiculturalism. In other words, it's now unconstitutional to uphold Swedish values in Sweden.
Okay, without getting drawn into an argument about whether this is true or not, do you have any actual case law that supports this being a problem? I mean, are you saying that in Sweden now that if a person is given a choice between having, I don't know, Swedish meatballs and some falafel, they have to pick the latter because if they don't they'll be charged with breaking the constitution? Or that if a Muslim or a Jew were to invite a Christian Swede to their place of worship to partake in their ceremonies, that they have to go or they're breaking the law? I mean, do you have any kind of proof this is anything other than simply a symbolic demonstration on the part of the government that it wants Sweden to be a place where non-Christians and people who are non-Swedes don't feel like second-class citizens? Is that actually a bad thing?
And I find this extremely puzzling, because all the Swedish people I've known have had every reason to be proud of who they are and of what their country is, or of what it was, and what it might be again one day if they ever come to their senses.
What, like trade partners with the Nazis during the Second World War in a desperate attempt to stave off invasion? Yes, I'd be very proud of that too if it was me. Oh no, actually I'd be quite ashamed of that, in exactly the same way that I'm ashamed of the UK's colonial past and the way we raped massive parts of Africa and then pissed all over it on the way out after we'd finished, leaving a corrupt mire in our wake.
Formerly regarded as one of the world's most pleasantly crime-free and civilized countries, Sweden is now officially the rape capital of Europe, with twice as many rapes per capita as any other country and 20 times more than some. What do you suppose could have caused such a fundamental shift in the Swedish national character? It's the last place anyone would have expected an epidemic of rape. It can't have anything to do with immigrant Islamic culture, of course, because nothing bad ever does.
Okay, so just that I'm absolutely clear here, higher levels of rape plus immigration means Islam. So apart from hearsay, do you actually want to provide some evidence for this, or do I need to read out the definitions of correlation and causation, because it doesn't seem that you understand the difference between the two?
You won't hear very much about immigrant rapists in Sweden, because for years the government and the press in that country have been conspiring in a crime against their own people to keep them in the dark, not only in winter but in summer as well. Swedish newspapers are heavily subsidized with government money, so journalists routinely censor the news to ensure that immigrants are never portrayed in a bad light and that non-Swedish criminals are never identified as such.
I'm sorry, but rather than say cite for this, I'm just going to go out and say bullshit. Have you actually ever read a Swedish newspaper? There are plenty of stories covering issues around Islamic integration, social exclusion, the problems with Muslims being concentrated in one area. I've watched news reports where people talk about the issues and how they're not being addressed. And are you really seriously saying that the Swedish media, if they are covering a story in a court or around a crime, then realise that the person in question is Muslim, they suddenly stop following the story? You really are saying that? Because if so, you're welcome to rejoin us on planet Earth anytime you like. And besides, since when did government subsidy equal propaganda outlet? I mean, the BBC is subsidised by the government, but, oh well, actually it's funded by the government, but are you saying that it doesn't ever say anything that's bad about the UK government or in our society, that it pretends that problems don't exist. I don't think it does.
For those of us watching from outside, especially after recent events, it's hard not to conclude that we are witnessing the open theft of an entire country, and all we can do is watch in astonishment and horror.
Or would that be like the open theft of the United Kingdom's culture that you're always banging on about? Tell me again about the sharia courts that are operating right now, overriding criminal law, able to do whatever they want in flagrant disregard of our Parliament and the Human Rights Act. Go on, that one really makes me laugh. I love hearing it. And Sweden has nothing even close to that, and yet you're claiming their society is disintegrating at the very roots. In fact, their immigration policies are actually, I think, probably a little bit more coherent than ours. I mean, they require people when they come to Sweden to actually learn Swedish. We don't force people to learn English when they come here. We still view it as optional, and we go to great lengths to translate into lots and lots of different languages for people, whereas Swedes tend to only do translation into English and Swedish. And also, given that you seem to think that they're too mealy-mouthed and politically correct, did you actually see the advert run by the Sweden Democrats in the last election? It was hardly a spectacle of moderate multiculturalism.
Den 19 september kan du välja invandringsbroms före pensionsbroms. Rösta på Sverigedemokraterna.
Oh, but no, wait, you didn't watch that because you're not actually interested in Sweden, are you? You just want to rant about Muslims whenever you, in whatever tangential way you can.
You might like to know that despite Sweden's ravenous appetite for Muslims, and yet more Muslims, no country has deported more Iraqi Christians back to Iraq to be butchered like Christmas turkeys for the crime of not being Muslims.
You may indeed have a point there. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen any data to support this, but I'd say it's probably no worse than how until very recently in this country we were sending gay Iranians back to Iran and basically just telling them, keep it to yourselves, keep your legs shut. Asylum frameworks are fraught with problems. It's very, very difficult to draw the line somewhere, and unless you want every asylum claim to turn into an automatic permanent residence, which I'm sure you don't, you've got to make up a policy that's going to have some casualties.
One inconvenient fact, however, is that the Quran tells Muslims to hate Jews because they're Jews.
Where does it say that? I can find quotes that refute that, such as Surah 262, there are those who attain to faith, as well as those who follow the Jewish faith and the Christians and the Sabians. All who believe in God and the last day and do righteous deeds shall have their reward with a sustainer, and no fear need they have, neither shall they grieve. Yeah, that's really saying, hate the kikes, isn't it?
Fortunately for Jews, they've had a lot of practice at taking abuse, and they've got fairly broad shoulders, which of course they'll need to carry around all those Nobel Prizes. Statistically, a Jew is thousands of times more likely than a Muslim to win a Nobel Prize, and there can be only one reason for that, can't there? That's right, Islamophobia. Clearly, the Nobel committees have an irrational prejudice against religion-induced ignorance, and they're obviously in need of some urgent cultural awareness and sensitivity training.
Well, you'll get no argument from me that people who happen to be Jewish do get more Nobel Prizes than Muslims. But then there are people who get Nobel Prizes for pretty much no reason at all, given their actual contribution to the world.
The Nobel Peace Prize for 2009 is to be awarded to President Barack Obama for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples.
Maybe the Swedish government could step in and take a moral stand, expel the Nobel Prize from the country and tell it to relocate to Tel Aviv, where it belongs. Admittedly, they would disgrace themselves and debase their country and embarrass the entire free world if they did so, but they're doing that already.
Yes, it would be incredibly embarrassing if a country renowned for its neutrality in global politics gave the Nobel process over to Israel, a country whose aggressive and might equals right foreign policy has been responsible for the deaths and oppression of thousands of people. Plus, how would they get all the prizes over that big wall they built, segregating a portion of the population from each other? See? Making cheap pot shots is really easy, isn't it? This has been Illuminatiprimus saying, Tack for Tita.